Hey guys, it's Sean here from Microbudget Film Lab, and as I promised last week, I was going to talk this week about deliverables and the relationship of deliverables to distribution. So some of you may know about deliverables, some of you may be thinking, what are you talking about? Are you talking about pizza, fast food, Chinese food? What are you talking about deliverables? So I'm going to talk about that, and I wanted to talk about the pluses and minuses of going through kind of more traditional distribution channels of like getting a sales agent, distributor, and so on versus self-distribution on platforms, but it will just be too long. So this week I'm going to talk about deliverables, and next week I'll talk about different forms of distribution that you can take with your micro-budget film, or different approaches to distribution that you can take with your micro-budget film, so that you feel like you have options, because those options do exist regardless of what your budget level is. As I say, I'm going to talk about that next week, because otherwise this would just go on forever. So let's talk about deliverables, because we just had our film, Brand New You, just went up on Amazon in the United States, the United Kingdom, Japan, and Germany. And now our sales agent, Adler Associates, just signed a 2-year exclusive deal with China Mobile, I believe, in China. So our film has gotten up on a major platform, but it's been too recent to really talk about, for instance, recoupment and what kind of money we're making from that distribution. So when that happens, when we start to get reports in, which will be a few months from now, because they're in reporting periods that are usually 4 times a year, and often payouts happen in the sort of the period after the report comes into the sales agent. So you don't actually, if you get paid, say in the second quarter, or if the report comes to them in the second quarter, they don't get paid till the third quarter, so you don't, until the end of the third quarter, get a report telling you how much you've earned. So I'll tell you those numbers when they come in, and you can get a sense then of what you can get, and I'll talk about the kind of marketing that we've done and that sort of thing at that time. But I want to just talk about deliverables now, because before we could get it up on Amazon or China Mobile, we had to fulfill some deliverables requirements. And some of those are required by the sales agent, and some of those are required for the deliverables process, for delivery for the platform that you're going with, or the distributor that they work with, or the broadcaster, and so on. So first off, if you sign with a sales agent, that whole first process itself can be quite intimidating. You have a contract that will come in. Some of the terms will seem like crazy to you. For instance, expenses, they get to write off their expenses against any future income. Those expenses can be up to $65,000, and they are supposed to report to you what those expenses are that they have charged, so that when they write them down, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to use all $65,000. They're going to burn through it, but they are permitted that, and then anything above that, they have to get special permission from you, and that's a pretty typical sort of amount. Also, the kind of rights release that you're going to get to them could be 10 to 18 years. When we signed, it was for, I believe, a 12-year rights release to Adler Associates worldwide, meaning that for 12 years they get to determine, or they will have the right to try to sell a brand new you, to resell a brand new you, and so on. And that, again, that seemed like a really long time, and we were kind of freaking out when we saw that. It was like, what? We're going to lose control of our movie for 12 years? But it was, I took it to the legal department at the company where I work in development, and they were pretty unfazed by that. It seemed like a pretty typical sort of amount. Now, that number has gone up since then to, I think, 16 or 18 years. So I'm not sure how that jives in terms of if things have changed in the industry or not. But you can expect to get that, and you'll get this contract that'll be quite thick and weighty, and you're going to have to sign it, but not just sign it, you're going to have to take it to a notary. And in the case of dealing with Adler, we had to take it to an American notary. We're Canadian, and the production team is Canadian. We had moved to Spain, so we had to find an American notary. Our comrades in Canada, who were still in Canada, had to find a legal office in Canada. And at first we made the mistake of going to a Canadian notary and thinking, oh, it's all the same, and paying them a couple $100 to notarize our signatures, to say that yes, indeed, we shall sign these things. It was valueless, so we had to go find an actual American citizen notary, and there was a few in the Toronto area. In Spain, we had to drive south. We live in Granada. We had to drive down near Malaga, which is on the south coast, about 90 minutes south of us, go to the American consulate, and there they were able to notarize it for could be several $100s American, plus a rental car and so on. So that, already we were running up about $500 just signing the sales agent agreement so that it met all the requirements. Then you get into what you have to provide in terms of the paperwork, because there's sort of three elements, I guess. There's the paperwork for the sales agent, there's the paperwork for the distributor, there's then there's the actual product, the film, and what you have to do to make the film acceptable. And there's also support material that you have to provide in the way of stills photos, behind the scenes photos, publicity photos, poster artwork, that sort of thing. Any kind of newspaper coverage that you've gotten, interviews that you've done, reviews, all that kind of stuff has to go in. That's like your publicity package has to go in with that. So in terms of your paperwork, this is really important that I can't stress enough. When you're shooting your movie, before you're shooting your movie, when you're shooting your movie, and after you're shooting your movie, that you're making sure you're getting all the paperwork that you need signed. Don't just think because your, cousin Leviticus is doing the sound work and your Auntie Dolores is doing the camera work that you don't need to get deal memos with them. You totally need deal memos. Don't think, well, I'm not going to distribute this, so I don't need to get this stuff, because if you change your mind, you're in a very difficult situation. I mean, even if you go self-distribution, technically you need all the rights releases, or somebody could come after you for income. They could say, I shot this film, we never agreed on the terms of my remuneration, and therefore I never would give a release to this, and they can prevent you from distributing your film regardless of whether you go through a bigger company or you just do it yourself on Gumroad or DVX or one of those companies. So you want to make sure you get your release forms and your deal memos, which are differently, and you get all your crew and cast to sign these things. Again, whether you're going through a union or you're just doing it very casually and doing it for no money, you want to make sure that you get releases for any photos that are done, that you get deal memos with your stills photographers. You want to make sure that you get releases, and you need two kinds of releases for music, so you want to make sure you get those when you go into your post period. You need to make sure that you get oh my gosh, I've forgotten, it's been a while. You need to get your sync license, and you need to get another one, the composition license. There's two licenses. If you look for the music releases online, you can find those two. So you need to make sure you get all of those releases, location releases, any artwork that's in there, any brand names that appear in there. You have to get releases for all of that. You have to make sure you have all your paperwork. A little thing here and there might slip through, but anything major, they're going to totally notice at the end. If you wrote the script, you need to have a deal memo or a screenwriter's contract with you, a director's contract with you, so on. You have to have all that stuff formalized, even if it's you as producer, you as director, and you as writer on the film, and you as star. You still need to have all that stuff in place. Now, finally, once you submit all that stuff and they vet it all, the sales agent, they say, okay, you've got everything here, this is all good. You are still going to have to go through a process of quality control with your film, because it has to meet certain criteria. You can't have all kinds of technical errors in your film, shots that don't match up, dialogue that doesn't match up with the video, all that stuff, and you're going to miss tons of that stuff in the editing process. It's inevitable. So they'll want you to go to a quality control house, and there's certain ones that, for instance, Netflix has approved and Amazon have approved, that they'll accept their quality control reports. So don't just go to anybody or any post house. Make sure, if you're trying to get on Amazon, and your sales agent will tell you this, as well as probably any aggregator like Gravitas Ventures is an aggregator. There's many of them. Distributor is another. You want to make sure that you go to one that's acceptable to the platform that you want to distribute on. Now, if you're doing self-distribution through, again, Gumroad or DVX or Distrify or one of those, it's not a big deal because you're the quality control side of that, so you don't need to get that report. But if you're going through a formal body, you have to do that every time they do a QC report, and they give you a detailed report of all the little clicks that you didn't notice, the camera, we had this a reflection of the camera that happens in a window that you couldn't avoid and you don't have any other shots. A little bit of microphone pops in, all kinds of other little technical things that will come up in it. You're gonna have to pay about, I think it was $1,200 US if you do it in the States, every time that you have a QC pass done. And we had to have it done like 4 times. Once because the wrong file got sent in once, and they did another pass on a version that they'd already done a pass on. So we had to pay for that, even though it was just a stupid mistake. But really, so we went in 3 times. That was like $4,500 American, which is a lot of money Canadian. It's much more than $4,500. So you're talking about a fair amount of money. At the end of the day, deliverables cost us, and again, we didn't have a complicated film with all kinds of CGI or anything, but deliverables cost us probably in the range of $8,000 to $10,000 off the top of my head. So you need to budget for that if you're going to go that kind of route. Maybe your budget means that you are assuming you're going to go put it on a credit card or whatever, but don't be shocked when that number comes in. So that gives you a sense of what we kind of went through, and it was a hellish, lengthy process. So steady yourself and expect to be facing 6 months to a year going through the deliverables process as you try to get all this stuff together, especially if you've missed things and then you've got to track down your DP or, all these things. Expect to go through that process over a long period of time, and don't get depressed when it takes you a very long time and expect to spend that kind of money, or do it more informally. But I still think you should get your paperwork, get all your dot your I's and cross your T's with your paperwork, because you don't want to be starting to distribute, just starting to get momentum with some maybe your own advertising and marketing campaign, and then you have to pull it off Gumroad because one of your actors didn't sign a deal memo and now they're pushing for $10,000 that you don't have, or they're going to sue you for it because you never signed a deal memo with them. So don't mess up that kind of stuff. Know what to expect, and know that you can make it happen. It can happen. So I look forward to talking next week with you about different distribution models, and make your movie.